Welcome everybody. Thanks so much for joining me today. It's really good to be here. So as Phil mentioned, I'm hopefully going to share with you 5 steps to rethinking your remote pedagogy. And this is really based on my experience that I've had over the last kind of 18 months. And the first thing before I start though, I'd really like to hear or see how you feel about teaching online, whether it's training, whether it's teaching students. Just use the chat, use GIFs or the voting button or anything that you can, so that I can just see whether it's something you're happy about, something you enjoy, whether it's something you dread, whether you don't look forward to it. That'd be great. Okay, so while you do that, I'm also just going to give you a little bit of a warning. So as I'm an associate professor of forensic science, so you might find a little bit of gory images on the next slide, but they are all absolutely fake. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of a heads up about sort of my area before we start. So 5 steps. The first one for me, and I know it's really important that we put students at the centre of everything that we do. You know, if we're talking about teaching and learning, whatever the age group of that individual. However, in order for the students to enjoy or engage within any of their remote teaching that we deliver, you've got to make it fun for you. If we enjoy teaching online, then hopefully those in attendance or those learning with us will also enjoy that learning experience. So for me, when I was first prompted with this notion of how do I teach online? I can't see people, I can't gauge their response. I tried to use technology, be it through Top Hat or Teams, to try and gauge that insight and that knowledge. But what about the environment in which I was teaching in? It felt very strange to be able to talk to a screen and not get any immediate responses. It might have been in my own home, and I didn't want the background to be distracting or unprofessional. So in my teaching, I tried to incorporate a load of different ways in which I could be creative, I could be engaging and interesting without necessarily having people respond with me in physical space. So you can see on the screen a range of different ways that I did that, and I'll talk you through some of these. But hopefully what I want to do today is get you to either be more energized about teaching and training remotely, or potentially think of new ways in which you could enhance the online provision that you're delivering at the moment. So just as an example, I got involved with doing and creating SFX wounds on myself, and my stepdaughter helped me to use myself as a prop so that I was a live individual that I could also utilize during my sessions. I also got students involved in using Twitter and social media so that they could share with not only myself, but other students and those external to the university what they were doing, particularly if we were looking at students who are prospective students or individuals who want to find out about what their learners are getting involved with while they're at university. So my first step was, how do I enjoy teaching online and in this remote space? So to help do that, I created my own teaching environment at home. So my daughter, she is a great artist, and she worked with me to help me turn my normal wall into an interactive space so that I could use it, I could point to it, I could have features that became visible. So when I applied ultraviolet lights, for example, and I turned off the lights, we could engage with the background in a really innovative, synchronized manner. The Students could also make observations, they could make interpretations, and we could discuss these live in the classroom. I used to provide my students with an opportunity to be a mentor, so senior learners mentoring the first year undergraduate students. And this opportunity I turned into a remote practice. So we co-created, co-designed with mentors a range of interactive workshops, so that in this case, my mentors created crime scenes in their own homes. We use Microsoft Teams to actually live stream with small groups. And the students told the mentors how to engage with the space and how to search the crime scene to find physical evidence, so that they could do this all through remote video mechanisms. My third one was to not only use the live streaming functions, but also to exploit the senses of my learners. We put together tactile teaching kits. So we sent out samples of evidence bags, suspect powders, which were completely safe and basically plain flour. We got them to utilize resources in their own homes. We created home teaching activities, getting them to build their confidence in doing practicals that used completely safe food items, for example, their own equipment, kitchenware, etc. And then they could develop those competencies and understanding and confidence before they actually entered the laboratory. And we could do that all through synchronous live teaching, utilizing group work, building group communities, using Flipgrid to get students to meet each other and engage with each other, and then using mentors as well to help support the learning environment during our workshops. I also sent out crime scene kits to the students, particularly those who were either potentially not being as engaged or visibly as engaged, but also to commend those who were really actively engaged in the sessions, to help also get them the opportunity to experience and share with others, again live in the class if they were willing to. So my fourth tip is to identify your tools and to approach people and your digital technologist for example, if there are mechanisms that you know that you could utilize that maybe you don't have access to, but we could. So I've mentioned Flipgrid. I also turned our face-to-face student research conference that the Student Society actually creates. I helped them to create a YouTube playlist. And so they shared all of these their research presentations actually through YouTube, so we can reach a much more diverse audience, and we could also enable international interest and sharing with practitioners as well as other students and across universities. My fifth one is my recommendation to either join or form a community of practice. It's great to be here with you all now because you are a community of practice. But in the field of forensic and crime science, at the start of the pandemic, we had very few resources that were tailored to our specific subject area and teaching remotely. And as a result, we created a new community of practice full of informal CPD development and sharing. This was Remote Forensic CSI, and we've been absolutely privileged to be a finalist for the Global Good Practice Awards. And we find out whether we've won or not in the start of November. But ultimately, this was about making accessible resources, about creating an online community across different continents. So we've got practitioners, further education providers, and also HE providers, members from all of those from different continents, sharing and learning together, helping to create our informal and hopefully for this season a formal CPD opportunity to continue learning from each other, to share new practices, share challenges and try and resolve and come up with solutions together as a community. And this really helped strengthen and support us in a very isolating period. So I was very privileged to work with my colleagues, Professor Ian Turner at the University of Derby and Leisha Nichols-Drew at De Montfort University, and working together with Lecture Remotely and also again on YouTube and using social media, we've been able to reach out and engage with a whole diverse community, which we would never have come together and worked with if it hadn't have been actually for the pandemic, but also about, you know, finding a gap and creating a new area where we could fill gaps of teaching and sharing pedagogic practices and supporting each other to learn together, to fail together, to help each other become more successful, more innovative, and really help each other to develop personally and professionally.
You've got about a minute left, Rachel.
Thank you. So for me, they were some of the approaches that I took. They may not be underpinned by pedagogic theory and lots of references, but for me, particularly in that moment in time, but also thinking about the future, it's often about how you work with your students, knowing your subject area, knowing how you want to deliver or what messages and what objectives you want the learners to achieve, and then trying to utilize as many different approaches to making it as enjoyable an experience for you in that remote session as it is for hopefully the learners and the attendees that are in attendance. So thank you very much for listening, and I look forward to any questions that you have.
Wow, brilliant. Thank you. What a good start. Thank you, Rachel. We haven't had any questions coming in the chat yet, but I have a question first of all, if that's okay. And then after that, if anyone does have a question, if you could raise your hand, we'll be able to unmute you so you can ask your question. Just at the end there, you said about, you know, it's really useful to get to know your students. Do you have any tips on how you could do that?
Yeah, and I primarily, a lot of my teaching, I work with level 4 students, so first year. And, you know, at the start, particularly when you're all online, you can't come together face to face. Using Flipgrid, which was an approach that one of our colleagues at the university, Craig, suggested, which was brilliant, was using Flipgrid for the students to get to know each other. But actually, it didn't actually work as we hoped. It didn't work as well as it did in the Institute of Policing. And the way in which I then turned that around was I actually embedded the Flipgrid activity into part of the learning within the curriculum. So I then got them to introduce themselves, as well as sharing a piece of knowledge that they'd learnt about as a pre-session activity. And then it created a dynamic and interactive resource that students could come in and drop in and out of. And it put a picture to the person's name, not only for me, but also for the students as well.
Oh, that's brilliant. And it's also, it's nice to know that sometimes we try something at the start and it doesn't work as we hope, but then sometimes just giving it a little tweak, as you said, then makes all the difference. So that's really interesting. Thank you. Does anyone have a question they'd like to ask Rachel? I don't think we have any hands up, but I think from my point of view, Rachel, it's so nice to see. I mean, we have a lot of people who are kind of really enthusiastic, but I really think that your enthusiasm when I hear you speak and, you know, when you're talking about what you do, it's so nice. It's so refreshing. And if anyone hasn't heard it already, I'll drop a link in the chat. But Rachel recently did a talk for the JISC podcast series, and it's a great talk. It really is. So I really would encourage you to take a look at that, and also take a look at the community which Rachel has set up, because it looks fantastic. I was having a look today, and I think there's a lot of work that's been put in there. So yeah, I'd just like to say
is just beginning. So if anyone would like to be part of our email distribution list and find out more about the sessions that we run, we'd be more than welcome for you to join the community. And if people want to put in the chat how they might maybe feel, if they feel any differently about the future of their own remote teaching practice, then please do feel free. It's been great to see some of your comments and thoughts now as I've been going through them. So thank you for your input there.
Brilliant. Okay, well, thank you, thank you. Well, in the interest of keeping to time, I think we have about 30 seconds left. So I guess we may move on to the next one now, if that's okay. But thank you, Rachel. Thank you.